So part 2 of our double feature is talking about using all of your data with Microsoft Fabric. So we kind of talked about a cool kind of hybrid way of sharing and working with either like remotely connected data, but probably less working with like huge data sets or heterogeneous data sets. We kind of need maybe a different tool, especially if like it's really big data sets. Excel, unfortunately, does not scale to like, enterprise grade data as easily. So there is a lot of data out there, like a lot. I've been having a lot of fun playing around with data.gov lately. But I'm sure a lot of folks here in chat work with different kinds of data, whether it's like logs from your debugger or smart home logging things or tracking your board game collection. I don't know. But what's the hardest or most annoying thing that you have to do with your data? Is it like cleaning stuff? Is it like just getting it to stay in sync somewhere? Drop it in chat and we'll see if any of the things we talk about might address some of that. But I'll give an example from my own kind of background here. So I did a PhD in quantum computing, and I was an experimentalist. So I had a lot of data to work with. I was working with laser communications to satellites in the Canadian wilderness. So we had like radio comm streams from satellites, photon detectors, air purifier logs, power supplies, weather forecasts coming from other places, manufacturer specs, so many different sources for data. Some of it just even a printed PDF. And sometimes those files could be really large. Like obviously you don't want that to be the case, but sometimes the tools that you're using, they're just like, I'm going to keep writing to this log until the end of time. And if you move it, I'll be angry. So, we had huge over gigabyte sized data files, because we're working remotely, some limited network connectivity. So it wasn't super easy to just like stream everything immediately. And we also, because we were working on academic collaborations, a lot of folks use different tool chains. Some folks use MATLAB, some folks use Python, some folks used R. Like we had different data formats, usually some variant of a spreadsheet to the earlier talk, but not necessarily. And so we had to work through proprietary, like reverse engineer APIs for things, or even just move them around on USB drives, which gives me panic attacks thinking about, because what if your USB drive walks away? And certainly none of that was often documented. So that is really frustrating. As we said in the last talk, I like grids, I like organizing, I like having everything kind of indexed. And so this was not a workflow that I felt happy with for my data. And I was kind of getting to the end of my rope towards the end of that project. Oh, deduping. Oh, that's got to be the worst. Because like you don't want to lose data. Thank you, JD. That's, I think, the winner. So these are a lot of problems. I want to talk about a cool new product that was launched at Build this year, so just in the spring, as a preview to basically address a lot of these challenges that if you're working on big teams, collaborating on data, people use lots of different tools, it might help with. So the way I kind of think about it is Fabric weaves together a lot of different services for Pythonistas. The services tools, it gives you a single point of truth or single source of truth for curating your data, whether that's it actually owns the data source itself, or it can basically link out to other data sources, even on other clouds. But basically, you can go to one place and see all your data of yours, your collaborators, everything kind of in one spot. There's all kinds of built-in analytics tools, AI tooling to build models really easily, like Azure ML, that already inherently understand all the data sources in Fabric. So you don't have to write connectors or everything to each individual tool you want to use. It just says, okay, where's your data lake? And Fabric takes it from there. As I kind of mentioned, we're Pythonistas, so we're probably interested in the Python related like interfaces and tools for Fabric. But there are lots and lots of other options. So if you're working with folks who are maybe less comfortable with code, who prefer low code or no code tools for exploring that data, for making workflows, there is all kinds of things for everyone. So you're all working on the same data, but in a way that you're most comfortable. And again, like Microsoft is well known for, all kinds of built-in security, governance, and compliance. So, especially if you're working with sensitive data or things, you can kind of, by having all your data in one place, rely on that as your kind of security story. But because security stuff is not something I'm a particular expert in, so I'm going to focus on kind of the first three aspects of Fabric right now, for getting and curating your data and using tools and sharing from Fabric to other collaborators. So from a definitional sense, so I started with kind of why I find it interesting. The actual literal producty things that you'll see that make up Fabric is basically there are these 6 kind of components and then a one lake. So that's basically like a data lake, and that's going to be your one source of truth data. And that's all. Fabric is kind of that which wraps together all of these pieces. So a lot of these components kind of were products or services before, and they've all kind of been integrated now in a way that you can just seamlessly connect and say, I would like to work with these pipelines over here. The one we'll kind of focus on today, that surprises no one, is the data science piece here. So that'd be Synapse Data Science. So let's jump straight into, I wanted to show an example of what it actually would look like to do this. So the first step to working with data is to get your data. And so we need to add it to that one lake. Just to give you a sense of what that actually, when you do, this is kind of what that, the one lake data hub looks like. So you upload, basically you connect all your data, upload things. It's JDS about querying service fabric Parquet files. I know that OneLake and a lot of the Fabric tools have a lot of have support for lots of different special data types, like Parquet files or other geodata, or I'm trying to think, specialized data formats such that that might work out pretty well. I'll definitely get back to you. Find me on Discord for that specific one. But basically, you can kind of go to one place and see everything for your org or that anyone else is sharing with you. Yeah, I forgot to say, but it's kind of, think about it as like OneDrive, but for all your data. So one way that you can add things to your OneLake is there's actually a desktop OneDrive like sync client. So I can add my OneLake as a folder on my local machine. And honestly, for a lot of the research or kind of like experimental applications, this is probably the most easy way to add some of the stuff that we had in these experiments, because I could just have the device directly logged to that folder on my machine, and then it would just be synced up. But you can also copy data in from other resources, maybe copy a database or something like that. And you can also just manually upload files, which is honestly what I've been doing to start with, to just get some data in there to play around with. The next kind of step up for adding data into the OneLake here is pipelines. So they basically give you a way, there's all kinds of like transformations and data sources that you can that are built in, and you can just say, hey, even here, like you can see in the sample data here, there's a bunch of Parquet files for public holidays. And there's both a visual graphical editor here. If folks, you want to work with people who want to edit your pipelines, and maybe like myself, you prefer like YAML files, like GitHub Actions descriptions of pipelines. You can also write Python scripts to interact with these pipelines and configure and automate them as well. As a expanded zoom in here of a bunch of those different connectors that you can see, there's built-in stuff for Amazon and Google Clouds. There's something, as basic as an HTTP query and web scraping that way. REST protocol, REST APIs, obviously all kinds of existing Azure data store options, even just your Microsoft 365 account. And tons more. So like you can combine and integrate all of these however you want in those pipelines. But all of those usually end in like copying the data into your OneLake. But the thing that I found really neat about this is you can also have shortcuts. So kind of in the same way that like Power Query in the Excel sheet example, we were kind of pointing to an external resource and having Power Query keep it up to date and synced in our Excel spreadsheet. We can add shortcuts here in our OneLake, pointing to resources that maybe we don't own, maybe it's something a collaborator that might be updating, and we don't want it to get out of sync. So the shortcuts here, I think, is going to be a really cool thing that I'm going to play more around with, because I do have a lot of folks that have data in different places. So you can see here, like the wizard walks you through all of the connection credentials and stuff. Again, I think you can do this all from the Python scripting side as well. But when you look at the OneLake UI, then you see the little folder icons with the little link. And so that indicates to you that it is a shortcut to data living somewhere else. So we've got our data in the OneLake. Let's actually use it and play around with it with Python, since that's why we're here. There's kind of four main ways that if you're a Pythonista, that you might interact with Fabric. So we already, I feel like most of my work is handled here for the first one, because we had the great talk on the Azure Python API earlier from Rohit, I think. So that is an option. There is web-based Jupyter Notebooks with a bunch of different kernel backend options. So you can do Python, you can do R, Scala, Spark, with some great collaboration features. You can also work on your data in Fabric locally in your VS Code with the same notebooks and stuff with the VS Code Synapse extension. And if you are working with folks who are kind of leaning towards the low and no code options, maybe like a Power BI, you can put Python scripts in some of these tools, like Excel and Python that we also just saw. You could use Power Query to connect to some of your Fabric resources that way. Because when you create the OneLake, I think it also, it creates a SQL connection interface that you can access anything in there. So that's kind of like the lowest hanging fruit. So just to show quick sample of that API, obviously the kind of get everything of the Azure API is pip install Azure. But in particular, a lot of the features here that we're looking at here for the data lake management is in Azure management data lake store. It's fairly straightforward, like anything else. You import the client, you set up credentials to connect to it. And the second code sample here shows a snippet of asynchronously syncing a local file system with files on your OneLake. So if you want to see more of that example in its entirety, you can go to aka.ms/python-fabric-api-sample. Promise I tried to make that shorter, but that was the shortest, most clear one I could think of. So yeah, that's one way. Way two is to use web-based notebooks. So very similar to a lot of other interface web-based notebooks like Colab or Azure ML or code spaces. Like you have a Jupyter notebook here in your browser, you can go to anywhere. There's no setup. It spins up a Spark cluster in the background, and in this case, you can see in that top menu bar, I selected PySpark. So I have a Python-based notebook, and I can just work with pandas and yeah, Don, explicit is better than implicit. Thank you. Internalized. So yeah, I can just run cells. You know, you can see the results for that pandas table loading. And you can see on the left, I have a little explorer for my lake houses. So that's a type of partition in a one lake. But I can look, in this case, I was uploading some file, playing around with some files from data.gov that were tracking manatees in the Everglades. So not only can you use them, though, use these notebooks, you can work with other people. So you have, similar to the Colab experience or other just like collaborative Word doc editing, you can have other people join the notebook and by sending them a share link, and you can have comments on individual cells. And it just makes it really easy to not have to like manage versions through Git and stuff like that. Eric, I will definitely type that URL in, or maybe somebody else can help me out with that. But yeah, so, but maybe the browser, maybe you're like me and you have 800 million tabs open and your browsers want to crash at any random time, and you want to work locally with this stuff. So you can see here, there's a button in the top menu bar that says Open in VS Code. You can click that, and it will, if you have the Synapse extension installed in your VS Code, it will connect to that workspace, which would be like your one lake for your data, your computational resources like Spark clusters and notebooks that you have in that workspace. So you can see here I've opened that same demo workspace here. You can see my manatee tracking, and I just opened the same notebook here, and the extension, when it installs, it actually creates a conda environment for you that you can use. You don't strictly have to, but it is convenient. So I picked that as my kernel, and then that kind of already handles automatically some of the authentication sorts of things. So I can just run the same code locally as well as on the cloud. Yeah, I think, and as I mentioned, there's all kinds of other tools like Power BI and Python and Excel that you can access all this data from Fabric in those tools and possibly use Python scripting in there. But Doug says Databricks too. Yep, Databricks is definitely in there. And yeah, I'm going to wrap up real quick, and then I see there's a bunch of questions, so I'll get to those in a second. So yeah, long story short, Microsoft Fabric is kind of a one-stop shop for all of your data, all your tools to work with that data, and it has some great Python support, like right out of the box, ready to go. Got your notebooks, your APIs, and then that means also if you're writing Python code, you don't have to write code to connect to your Cosmos cluster, to connect to your SQL server, to connect to a blob storage somewhere. You can just write to the Fabric API and it'll handle everything else internally. So I'm looking forward to fixing up some of my projects that way. So we have the single data source curation, built-in analytics and packages for, I didn't touch much on the machine learning stuff, but that's the Azure ML tooling. Snowflake is also definitely in there, Mark. It's easy to share and collaborate with folks and is secure. So if you want to try out some of the stuff, it is in preview right now. So there is a lot of kind of features that are just free to use and try out. You can go to aka.ms/learnfabric. That'll take you to the docs to kind of, as you saw with some of those diagrams, there are a lot of moving pieces to Fabric, depending on kind of what your specialized work area is or domain. So that can be kind of overwhelming, but I would suggest start with focusing on the data science component of it. And then if you're familiar with a lot of the other tooling that folks are talking about in chat, you can kind of see how those interact and how there are some good docs pages of kind of comparisons to working with that tool and then working with that tool in Fabric. And because there is already a lot of ecosystem and community around the Synapse tooling and the Power BI tooling and things like that, there is some great community options at aka.ms/fabric community. I was blown away, and I was reading through a lot of the forums and blog posts as I was preparing for this talk. But if you have questions and stuff, there's lots of great folks and user groups that you can get engaged with to start kind of weaving Python into your Fabric. So hopefully I think I've saved enough time here for a few questions. But yeah, if you want to just the general basic, learn more about Fabric, just aka.ms/fabric.
You're right on time, a consummate professional, as always, as I know you to be. We have a couple of questions. I did want to just start with, can you please share that URL again? Do you want to just scroll back a couple of slides so we can just get it on the screen?
We're gonna.
Yeah, perfect.
And oh yeah, I can't. I don't have good access to the chat. How I've set up my computers here. So
cool.
Thank
and we'll
you.
leave that on screen for a second while we all scribble that down, because it was an amazing presentation. We also got a couple of claps in the chat. Amazing talk about Fabric. I would agree. I think it was very informative as well. It was really great. We also have a question. Does Fabric have a Discord?
Not that I know of. Okay. There is a general Azure Discord, which I know has some channels for like the Synapse.
I'll leave you on the screen, and I'm gonna bring it up on my screen. So
okay, cool. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
So in addition to our Python and Microsoft Discord, there is a more general anything Azure Discord that will definitely have some folks knowledgeable about Fabric and some of the stuff in it. But as I said, like the community blog for this is just kind of off the chain. Like there were so many cool examples that I saw. So definitely give that a look.
Awesome. And maybe we can do one more question or two more questions. I don't want to hold everyone up before their lunch as well. Do you see one that looks good?
Let's see.
We could start at the bottom because those are the most recent ones.
Got it. Doug asks if we already have a workflow of data factory pipelines that calls a series of Synapse jobs. Is that easy to integrate, or do we need to set it all up again? To the best of my understanding, and I'll definitely follow up with you in Discord if that's helpful, but basically Fabric, it's working with those existing services. So I think if you have them set up already, you basically just kind of add them under that umbrella, say, hey, this resource is part of this working group, and I think you should just have access to them as they are. Alternately, like you can use pipelines in Fabric to ingest from those. I think there's a lot of, like many tools here, once you have a lot of options, there's lots of ways to plug them together. So
that was the name of your whole presentation, flexibility. We are giving you a dozen different ways, more than a dozen different ways to do any one thing stored anywhere. I appreciate
and with great
that.
Power comes great responsibility. So,
exactly.
I know that can be very, like, even for me, some preparation for this was a little bit overwhelming because I don't use a lot on my day-to-day, a lot of these kind of low and no code tools, and I'm just like, they're so which is good. So, but it means like the thing that really appealed to me about that is I can work with people who would normally work with other tools than me. Like I can work, I work in usually VS Code, Jupyter Notebooks, Python scripting. I can work with someone, you know, even working sometimes with someone in PyCharm might be a little tricky just because we work differently. Now, like imagine working with someone who works in Power BI or even Excel, like obviously that's a cool combination, but it is kind of a different mindset. And so um, I also see it as kind of an accessibility tool that, you know, is easy for me to then work with other people.
Very cool. All right, I can keep you on the stream while we go through a few of the closing announcements and say goodbye.
Sounds
Cool.
good.
So excellent talk. I just want to remind everyone today, this may be where you are. You could also be joining us from Twitch. Make sure you like and subscribe. We have great content coming out on both of these channels, wherever you are. And also, let's give it a like because I love that presentation. It was fantastic. I unliked and then liked because I wanted the whole thing with it. I wanted the interaction. I'm not corny. We also have Python Day collection in the description in the show notes that I'm showing you. I opened it up on a new tab. We have a whole bunch of resources for you. I clicked through to the Cloud Skills Challenge that is working, and we'd love for you to all join. And then here's the Cloud Skills Challenge. We have a GitHub repo that is advertising all of the Cloud Skills Challenges today. I'm a web dev. I think you should go for number 2 first, but you get your pick in. You don't have to listen to me. You can do any of these Cloud Skills Challenges, and we'd be more than happy to have you join us with this learning journey. I also want to encourage everybody to join us at MS Azure Dev on Twitter. We have tons of chatter over there. We have tons of conversations. We talk about the live streams that are going to be coming up. And then we also talk about new features and releases on Twitter. So join us there as well. And I have the Discords up. I hope this is large enough. I like increased the size several times over. So we have the Azure Discord, and then we also have the Microsoft Python Discord. Tons of friends over there. And then we also have the event details. That's what we're doing today. All full circle. We keep all of this updated.